Denver Street Stories.
The views expressed by any individual in this interview are entirely their own and are not necessarily shared by Denver Street Stories. Denver Street Stories is an active supporter in the LGBTQ+ community. We stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, and as intersectional feminists, we support equity and equality for all peoples. Denver Street Stories supports sovereignty and land back to Indigenous communities. We strive to actively deconstruct oppressive colonialist structures. Denver Street Stories. These are our stories.
Welcome to part 2. If you missed part 1, be sure to check it out.
And I know already that housing insecurity disproportionately affects trans and non-binary people for sure. But even without that, if you're in a position where societally you're expected to work less, or even if you do work, you're only making 80 cents on the dollar compared to certain other people, already you are set up to have a harder time maintaining housing. I know for myself, I've been in a lot of situations where I was living with people and I really felt like I couldn't do it on my own. I really had to be in a relationship. And I think it's a lot of societal stuff. Obviously it's we'll find a friend or whatever and go and have a roommate or things like that. But, there are a lot of other pressures. And so, you end up feeling I'm glad that I'm housed, but having to put up with a lot of feelings of unsafety, or even if not that, just feelings of your autonomy being stepped on, or you have to cook, clean, and work in order to live with somebody else. But I look for I do look at housing, not as much as I used to, because now I'm I can't afford anything. But I have joined some housing groups because I'm maybe somebody will let me park there. And it hasn't happened yet, but I do still see. And folks are it's $800 to $1,100 to have 2 to 5 roommates in a house. And I think it's good, everybody gets housing, but also that's a lot. That's a significant amount of money. And it's there's no rent caps, and there's no safety net, there's no security. It's one thing to choose to live in that environment, but it's another thing to be I literally, I can't, I have to be in that environment or I don't get housing.
And the fact that housing is for profit, nobody should be profiting
absolutely not
off of someone else just living. Mm-hmm. You should be able to just live.
And I've been thinking recently about how many different entities benefit from people remaining poor and remaining unhoused. I mean, remaining poor, that's a whole other, that's even bigger. That's huge. There's so many. But just about houselessness, for example, all the shelters, all of these groups that all of their work is focused on services to houseless people. Denver Rescue Mission is at 153 years in business, because even the nonprofits, they're all making money. Nonprofit means there's no money left over. So if you are going to have money left over, you just allocate it to the CEO and there's no money left over. Now you're nonprofit. And so it's, so none of these groups, Catholic Charities, VOA, none of those groups have incentive for houselessness to no longer be an issue, because they lose all of their state and federal funding in order which also pays their way. Something that cops say to me when I'm talking to them about why are you enforcing the sweep right now is, well, this is my job. If I didn't do my job, I'd be right here on the streets with these people. Is that what you want? And I'm you're so close to getting it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's way too common. How these housing structures, in a lot of places, landlords, the sun is bothering me.
Yeah, do you want to
landlords, they can write empty units off on their business insurance and get paid for them. And in some cases, there's a certain number of units that it behooves you to leave those empty, because you get more money and less risk or liability by keeping them empty than by moving families into them. And as you say, for-profit housing is fucked. That should never have ever made it to the drawing board. For-profit housing, for-profit food, for-profit labor. Because corporations, none of these places with the most money, these corporations, have any incentive for houselessness or poverty to be resolved. Like, I know that it's like out of vogue to use slave labor and child labor and stuff, but a lot of corporations do it until they get caught. And even then, they keep trying to do it until they get caught again.
Yeah, or just like find loopholes and ways around it.
Right. And you know, and in the United States, there's convict leasing, and a lot of items that we use and take for granted every day are created by people who are really basically not being paid for their labor, who are in prison. And as we already said, you know, there's a huge racial issue with who is getting arrested.
And that definitely happens with like immigrants too, like
Yes.
not being paid for their labor.
Yeah, and then to get into like domestic labor and how that does tend to be people of color and pretty much always women or people who are put in that like subservient role. And this is all childcare, cleaning, all of that is considered low respect jobs that you have to do.
And the whole idea of like unskilled labor. How is there any kind of labor that's unskilled?
Yeah.
Like that, and like paying people less for doing unskilled labor, construction and things like that.
Right. I mean, it's all a way, I think, for different groups to put more money into their own pockets. Like if you're a decision maker, why, like, are you going to advocate for yourself to have a lower wage so that other people can have a higher wage?
Of course not.
It just doesn't happen that way, which is really frustrating. I struggle because I can't wrap my mind around it, because I'm like, I don't want money. I would love to figure out, like, if I had anything to leverage, to use it to bring up other people. Like, I don't need a salary, like raise their salaries, or like I feel like I would make different decisions. But, you know, that's why I'm poor and living at a park.
I feel like, but people have kind of like a mentality about things where they think that resources are scarce and there's like not enough to go around. But they don't realize that if everybody in the community were to share resources and support each other, like there would be so much abundance for everybody.
For sure. I mean, that about scarce resources, I'm like, if you're not even trying to distribute the resources to everybody, how are you going to claim that they're like if you are trying and there's not enough to go around actually, then
but if
maybe there's resource
1% of the
scarcity,
population is like holding all the resources, then that's why there's no resources
and
for everyone.
if a lot of resources are kept behind a paywall, it's not accessible. I really think that everything needs to be more accessible, except jobs. Fuck jobs. Abolish jobs. I'm so not into it. I would really love to get to for everybody collectively to get to a place where we can say, wait, everybody needs housing. So why are some people, you have a spider, being gatekept from housing? Just because of lack of payment. Like if everybody needs it, then why would it be something that only some people can access? And so I would love for people to be like, food, all of us need food. Why is this grocery store profiting? Why are all these advertising brands profiting from us needing food? We should just have access to it.
And water, like you said, like there should just be water stations everywhere for people. Everybody would benefit
Absolutely.
from that.
I mean, a lot of things are just generally anti-homeless. Like a lot of stuff that would benefit disabled people, people with young children. I mean, really, like it's kind of like when the people at the very bottom are free, then that would mean that everybody is free. Combahee River Collective said, like, when Black women are free, that would mean that everybody has to be free. Because if you are actually going to provide for the least of the people, everything that benefits the least of us benefits everybody else. It really, like, there is no trickle down. It literally is not, it doesn't happen because the people at the top hoard. They want to protect their position, their status, their house, whatever, their vision of themselves or whatever. Because, like, I grew up in a situation where my parents broke up before I was born, but I lived with each unit at different times. So I got to compare. My mom, always poor, always working hard, constantly working, and not desk jobs. And then my dad, his family, like his parents working from home, him having some telecom job or whatever, making the big bucks, buying homes to live in for a year and a half and then selling it to move into another house, like no issues obtaining anything. And they treated my mom so shittily. I think there's also a racial component. My mom's black, and that those folks are white, and they are definitely, from my own experiences, racist. But I do think that you see that a lot. Like, typically, well, like customer service, you know, why do angry people take it out on the customer service person who has the least power and control in the entire fucking company? I think it's always that hierarchy. Like, so many people need to feel above somebody else.
And like in a society based on hierarchy, like there's always going to be people at the bottom.
Yeah, there has to be, because then otherwise you lose
there'd be no one at the top.
Yeah, there always has to be somebody at the bottom. Marta Russell was a writer and activist back, I want to say, in like the 90s and early aughts, and she talked about she called it like the reserve army, but it's basically like she was talking about disability, but I think it applies to anybody who can find themselves in a place of desperation. The idea is that the society gets to decide who they want to prioritize, and then when things get bad, like say there's like issues with inflation, crisis, like, you know, the COVID pandemic, a lot of people losing jobs, things like that, then all of a sudden they can call on these desperate people. They can call on the disabled people. They can offer opportunities to houseless people that otherwise wouldn't be allowed. So these people then get to continue keeping things running.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
As soon as stuff gets back to normal, as soon as all your normal people can get back to work, guess who's losing their jobs? Mm-hmm. Guess who's losing their benefits and going back to where they were?
People don't think about how like our society literally benefits from people being unhoused. Mm-hmm. It benefits from anybody that it can exploit, like when it wants. Mm-hmm. And that's like really the biggest issue.
Yeah, as somebody who falls in that exploited person category, I find it quite distressing. And I wish that people who didn't find themselves in the exploited category also found it distressing.
Yeah, that's the issue, when people are like, they can just ignore it.
It's such a bummer, because as we look along history and all the struggles, like the labor struggles, human rights struggles, it always ends up being people fighting for themselves. Why don't people reach across the aisle? Why aren't there, like, people have so much power.
And if we all fought like for each other and together, mm-hmm. like then we would achieve justice and like equity for everybody.
Yeah, it makes me think of the I want to say the 14th Amendment, where like they're like, all right, these things will be allowed for all people. But then everybody's like, okay, but who counts as all people? So first it was like, all right, enslaved people count as all people. So now this is for enslaved people. But then, you know, gay folks are like, well, what about us? And they're like, oh, all right, now we have to have another fight. Mm-hmm. And then what about, you know, every single group has to have another fight when it's all the same argument.
Yeah,
it's all
the
hey,
same.
We all should have access to basic things. But it has to be a whole fight for every single individual group. Whereas you say, if we could just work together and say, nah, like everybody, like nothing for one group, everything for every group, that we just have the fight once, and then ideally everything is better on the other end for it. But now we have such a battle against like popular sentiment, and like people having warped ideas about, like, you know, houseless people can't be permitted in the area because of market rates, or like just little things like that. Like, people are so caught up. I say people, I'm speaking very generally. I guess I mean, in this case, like, say, house people and business owners who are against house people and are against the types of things that house people would say that they want. They just get caught up with these other types of ideas. But as I say, like, you know, if we are squabbling amongst each other, then we will have less time and energy to actually force the government to be different or to do something different and to step up. Instead, we can just have these fights in the streets. Mm-hmm. These fights in the streets don't make it up to like DC or whatever, the actual the top decision makers.
Okay, so I guess this is my last question, because I think we got to wrap it up soon. But I guess, like, how do you think that we can help people to come together better, to like fight these issues more like as one?
Intolerance. I would say, like, we really have to start putting our feet down and say, no, not everybody's opinion matters on every subject. And so if there's people who are worried about their market rates, shut it down. Tell them no, like, that's not a valid concern here. I don't know. Like, I've honestly thought about, like maybe there needs to be discussions with, like, I hate to center the people who are against these issues, but if we really need their numbers, like, you know, having conversations with these people in housing who are so against houseless people about, well, like, what are you concerned about? What are your fears? Like, I can tell you really care about your community. You want to keep it safe for the kids, and you want to protect your investments and things like that. So, like, you know, so what is it? And it's, I mean, I don't know. Like, I even disagree with myself saying that. I just can't think of anything else, basically. I hate to give more platform to a lot of those folks who are against basic rights and accessible things for all people.
It's a big question to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. what do you do? Like, if you need those people, and I guess that's a question too. Do you need them? Maybe like it is more about like trying to convert moderates to let people know that you can't stay in the middle. You know, any lack of any indecision or not taking action is putting points on the side of people who are going to keep access away from people.
And I guess like that's part of what we're trying to do with Denver Street Stories is like show people's stories and like get people to just have more empathy and just like think about other people a little bit more.
Yeah, hear the facts.
Reach out to more people.
Don't make it up. And if you're going to have views about a group, make sure those views are coming from the group and not from somebody who just has thoughts about the group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for talking with us. That was an awesome interview. And I love your Kraken. And I think you should go eat your food now because it smells so good.
I know. I should probably stir it.
Thanks for listening to Denver Street Stories. We aim to help change the narrative surrounding homelessness by providing a platform to amplify necessary and diverse voices. We hope this sheds some light into a world often pushed aside and disregarded. We should hate less, love, and listen more.